Okay, listen, I know this is the biggest cliched line in the history of any internet game critic, but it's the only way I can convey my feelings right now. I wish I didn't have to talk about the game like this. Grounded 2 is the early access sequel to the survival sandbox game I literally reviewed a couple weeks ago. Just like the first game, you are a group of the same teens who have been mysteriously shrunk down to the size of an ant, yet again fighting against an unknown entity and surviving the grassland wilderness to try and grow back to normal size. Take the part where I say yet again and get really used to it. Point is, if you've already heard of the first game, you pretty much know what you're signing yourself up for at this point. Despite already releasing an early access for the first game, the creators of Obsidian decided to run back the early access process to let us have a part in the development, which I have issues with for reasons we'll discuss later. That all being said, is the game good? Is it bad? And why didn't I want to talk about the game like this? Well, stay tuned and find out. Also, consider hitting that like and subscribe button, especially if you want me to visit the game when it has a full release. Or don't, I mean, hey, you do you, not your mom. Let's actually start with a recap of the pros and cons that carry over to the sequel. For the sake of not repeating things I've said before and for brevity, I'm going to quickly recap and rattle off all pros and cons that still remain in the new game. Starting with pros, the game still looks gorgeous. I mean, it is a stylized game that style hasn't changed much between titles, so it's bound to look roughly the same, which since it was beautiful looking to start with, it still is now. Gear still has unique benefits for being worn and upgraded, so no armor ever really feels useless or outclassed if you're willing to put the upgrades into them, except for a few. And we will talk about those. Mutations returned this game, but instead of hiding all the requirements of every mutation until you happen into what you need to do, it instead outright tells you how to level the mutation up. So same system, more clarity, still good outside of something we'll talk about later. The game still has a set map, which makes adventuring feel fun to do because you now know where to go to get what you need. Bugs all have their own strengths and weaknesses, which not only have seemingly carried over one for one to this game, but it also applies to your buggy, which we will discuss what a buggy is later. Bug invasions returned and still makes building defenses feel worthwhile and fun. Milk Molar upgrades are back, and yes, you can still build to get places you shouldn't be. As for returning cons, Arachnophobia filter is the exact same as it was in the first game, which means it still doesn't quite relay enough information to the player. Armor in the crafting system still doesn't tell you the set bonuses, which yes, did bite me in the ass again when I crafted red ant armor and realized that the set bonus wasn't the same as the first game. Fucking typical. Basing is still effectively stuck to wherever the resource analyzers are, otherwise you have to walk to one every time you want to learn a new recipe. A lot of bug behaviors didn't change much between titles, which means yes, the bugs are still not really doing bug things, but outside of these recaps, the things not listed got changed, so let's move on to the new good bits. Alright, let's get the big kahuna thing people were excited about out of the way. The mounts, also known as buggies. In the first game, you were never able to ride on top of an insect at any point, I mean, unless you count hitching a ride on Ladybug's back, but that's the equivalent of Minecraft pig riding without a carrot on a stick. However, in Grounded 2, not only is this a new feature, but it's a feature that is handed to you early on as it's basically required. Each buggy has a unique ability that makes it serve a utility, the easiest one to mention being the red soldier ant, which cuts down roots, allowing you to enter once blocked off areas. They also move incredibly fast and can be used for combat. Their combat uses not being only locked to when you're riding it. You can either ride it and use the bug's attacks, or you can hop off and let it attack for itself, which does allow it to grab aggro. This one addition pretty much changes how many situations are approached. Almost too much, and we will talk about that later. But hey, as a starting point for this feature, I'm happy to have it here and it's genuinely fun to run and jump around the park. Speaking of the park, the new map is pretty cool. All new iconic landmarks, brand new underground layers, and the devs weren't lying that the third of the map that we are currently given is about the size of the old backyard, so the scale of this game is gonna be huge. I genuinely can't wait to see what the rest of the park and future updates bring forth. Also, I don't know if I just got used to it, but it also seems like the line frequency from your character is reduced. They still talk a decent amount, but it wasn't enough to get me to turn off the voices this time. I can also certainly confirm they didn't notify me of every single breathing thing in this game. And though people did bring up that mentioning every creature was to notify other players when you're playing multiplayer, but I think that can actually be remedied by just a ping system. Point is, the issue got fixed. We also got the Omni tool, which replaces the tiered tools we had in the first game. Instead of half your inventory being dedicated tools, all your tools now sit in a contextual multi-tool, which is used by pressing E on the resource node. Now you can actually utilize your inventory. Honestly, a pretty big-brained addition. And that's all the new pros I have. Yeah, I know. I can feel your concern through the screen. With how few new good things I had to talk about, I guess it's time to discuss the new bad things, including a rather massive concern I have with the game. Let's kick it off with probably the most talked about issue right now, the performance. And no, I'm not talking about the weird bugs, those are a given. For the record, my PC ain't a broke boy computer. I have a borderline current gen graphics card, a processor that's maybe only 2 gens behind, and 32 gigabytes of RAM. And despite all of this, the game has harsh intermittent stuttering even on my PC, and I'm talking completely unpredictably sudden. Imagine you're walking down the street with earphones on, just grooving, and suddenly I pop out and spray you with a water gun full of molten nickel. Like that. Sudden, unpredictable, and definitely fatal. The performance problems were bad enough that I had to drop the difficulty to mild so the game having a stroke wouldn't result in me punching my ticket earlier than I deserved. I've died a good handful of times to these lag spikes, and if my machine is doing this, I can only imagine the shitstorm the average player is experiencing. Another issue actually comes down to the bouncing with the buggy. They are bafflingly strong. Attacking while on the mount has almost no downsides outside of doing less damage than tier 3 weapons, and the health pool is exclusively the bug's health, so even if it depletes, you still have plenty of health to fight on when you get ejected off. The bug revives like a player, meaning if you can get enough space, you can revive the bug mid-fight and have it fight and take aggro again, which I don't think I need to spell out how that's busted. And the most egregious detail, you can fucking parry with your buggy. Not block, not resist damage, full-on parry and take no damage, and parrying actually replenishes energy. And I want to be clear, when I say not block there, I don't mean there's no blocking. I was just trying to emphasize the fact that I was not trying to exaggerate here, that you can parry. Like, fucking parry with a health pool that's not yours. So, in other words, the safest, most optimal strategy in the game is literally getting on your mount and just using the parry timing you've already become accustomed to. Listen, bugs blocking, fine. Totally okay. It adds a layer of depth to the mount combat, and it's good. And I can see buggies being used as a way to practice parry timing. However, the fact it not only still prevents all damage with the buggy, but it even replenishes energy for doing so? Complete overkill. Considering the fact that the health while riding it is completely isolated from your own health, there is zero reason why you shouldn't be riding it. And even if you didn't ride it, it still has the ability to grab aggro from you, which can serve as a safe getaway or the distraction you need to get the final blown up bug you really shouldn't be killing yet. And if for some reason it dies and didn't get revived, it's not gone forever, it just respawns after some time, so even its death really isn't punished. And to be fair, there's areas bugs can't be in, but that's a pretty small limitation to circumventing the difficulty of the entire game. I feel like this was done deliberately to get us talking about them, but they didn't even need to tune them this strongly. The prospect of blasting across the park at a speed you were never able to before is already enough of an incentive to talk about how good they are. Anyways, moving on. Let's discuss the map. I have a few concerns regarding its overall design. Now before I begin, let me be clear. The core landmarks and vibe are great. They're large enough to be found from most parts of the map, and if not, you can always open your improved Scabby map to clearly see where it's located. My issue isn't with that though. Is with the lack of minor landmarks. In Grounded 1, every single section of the yard had some sort of small landmark that would serve as a sort of way to help you find your way in places without relying on waypoints the whole time, and they were abundant, they were fucking everywhere. On top of this, these landmarks would add a lot more character to what would have been a pretty standard backyard. Like, remember when you saw the Battletoad by the hedge? It was cool, it was just like a minor little thing that was cute. Plus, seeing all the giant props around you would really put your scale into perspective that you are tiny. Any game has giant bugs, that's in every game. Play Skyrim, giant spider, like there's tons of them. But in Grounded, the thing that made it so magical was just the fact that when you actually explored the map, there was things far larger than you that were just props. They were just like things like cups or like fucking candy. And I'm not necessarily saying that there's none of these in the game, but there's definitely a lot less where I can go for literal meters of park range and still not see anything that really discerns where I'm at. Also, I want to talk about how this game handles its inaccessible, unfinished areas. In Grounded 1, you had raised parts of the backyard, which actually served as a great way to, in an immersion-based way, just sort of tell you, hey, there's nothing up there yet. Can't go there. Bad. Bad boy. Go back to fucking pond. This may sound silly, but it allowed for the immersion to remain intact. In Grounded 2, you're stopped by magically appearing yellow tape that is mysteriously your size. No landmass blocking your view, no towering walls to make you feel genuinely trapped, just fucking yellow tape. It's not bad, it's definitely better than an invisible wall, but it certainly lacks that character the old method had. More on the map, going back to the lack of landmark statement I made, this actually raises a concern for me. Not the large concern I talked about earlier, but still a concern nonetheless. If the third of the park that is backyard size feels this empty right now pre-updates, then I actually kind of dread the rest of the park expansions. The backyard felt fun to explore because of the sheer density of these cool props like the baseball, the mixtapes that led to the picnic table, the D&D-like game that was on that picnic table. Without the landmark density, a large park would just feel entirely overkill if there's nothing to fill the empty space. Anyways, enough about the map, let's move on. Another thing I have an issue with is I feel like the pacing of this game is not all that great. Not because of like some time-gated events or something, but rather the fact that the resources you need for upgrades are normally not really anywhere near the story objectives. In the first game, you would actually sort of stumble into the new resources as you complete story segments. For example, the hedge lab would show you where the berries were at, giving you berry leather. Pond lab showed you bones and koi skills. The gas lab showed you where the fungal growths were at. Point is, every single point in the story progression would also show you a new major resource you needed to get proper upgrades as well as a new bug. The current state of Grounded 2, on the other hand, doesn't seem to do that as much, if at all. The lingonberries are completely out of the way, which are necessary for higher tier armor sets and for an Omni Tool upgrade, and the bugs are in areas that don't feel as particularly specialized as they were in the first game. Like in the first game, you had antlines in the sandbox, bees at the picnic table, stink bugs at the weird trench area right between the anthill and the gas canister, wolf spiders under the oak tree, and sure, the bugs could still be found out and about in smaller locations, but they had a set area where you could find an abundance of them reliably. While this may sound a little silly, it made pinpointing bug-based resources easy and also fun to do. Meanwhile, it feels like the bugs in this game are just sort of fucking placed wherever the does felt like. And man, did they really love scorpions, because they're fucking everywhere. Same with orb weavers, even though they're definitely easier to kill this game. The point is, it makes the otherwise deliberately designed world feel less deliberate, which sort of loses points on the praise I had about the set map in the previous title. Anyways, let's talk about some minor points before we discuss the big one that will likely take most of the video's runtime. There are far less mutations in this game than there were before, like considerably so, and I'm sure we'll get more in later updates, but this feels like a really shallow amount of them to start with. The coziness mechanic is not here, and it won't be here till a future update. A lot of tier 1 weapons don't have unique effects anymore. For example, the Larva Spear, which I presume to be a stand-in for the old Larva Blade, doesn't even have the effect on attack anymore. It feels like a lot of these early weapons' only point is to be a damage stick with no unique traits, and that makes them sort of lame. And granted, in the first game, we also had some weapons that were just damage sticks, but there are more tier 1 options in this game, and a lot of them just do damage or don't have a noticeable effect. I might also be dumb, but what's new? Armors have class-based bonuses to help favor that class-building energy that was kinda in the first game, and while most class armors have a genuinely good effect, Fighter perk is worthless in single player. And I'm aware this game was designed to be played with friends, but that doesn't mean that single player should get sets that legitimately provide little to no benefits. Taking more aggro as an armor bonus is a big nothing burger in single player, because you're already taking 100% of the fucking aggro. There's no avoiding that. It doesn't matter if you show up wearing a ghillie suit or iridescent parachute pants. If you're the only person near that rabid bear, you're still gonna get mauled. And even if your bug took aggro, I'd rather my bug tank damage than myself, seeing as me dying actually has a consequence. This class perk sucks ass. Just give it a stronger charge attack damage with two-handed weapons or something. Literally anything that isn't exclusively a multiplayer bonus. And more on armor, the set bonus is still hidden until you wear the whole thing. Don't know why we're still doing this, just tell us what the set bonus is in the crafting menu. Anyways, it's time for the biggest concern I have. You might have noticed the larger amount of new cons I had than new pros. Well, let's remind ourselves that a lot of pros were given in the recap, and as the game still does a lot of what this game did prior really well, this means the game is objectively still good, because the game did all of those good things nearly the exact same way as the first game did it. Which, if this doesn't sound like a problem, let me run that by you again. They did almost everything the exact same way. If you're still not getting it, let me just shoot straight then. This game doesn't feel like a sequel in the slightest. In my eyes, the point of a sequel is to elaborate on existing systems while keeping the core pieces that make the series what it is, or alternatively, just directly evolving the core concept in many ways to where it's a noticeable upgrade by comparison. I still hold this standard to an early access title because it's still a sequel even if it's unfinished. For examples of my point, think Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 as an example of my former idea, or Sims 2 and Sims 3 as the latter. Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 both have the core pieces that make this series what it is, but both games have fundamentally different combat styles that are similar on the surface level, but hardly the same in both mechanics and overall execution. Neither necessarily better than the other, but both are good in their own right, which makes them both worth playing. Sims 3, on the other hand, is an overall evolution to Sims 2 in a lot of ways, and while there are general mechanics that are isolated to both games, it's hard to argue that Sims 3 isn't an evolution on the formula from the prior title. However, when it comes to Grounded 1 and 2, the problem is the sequel in its current state fails to do both. It's doing everything in almost the exact same ways as the first game. Building is the exact same, but coziness is noticeably missing. Combat is almost the exact same outside of being slightly faster than a dodge button, but the dodge button isn't a parry, and the parry remains to be the best defense in the game, so it's the exact same combat as the first game outside of speed. The attack patterns on the bugs are mostly the same, except for some of them block now, but that's it. Movement outside of the buggy feels the exact same. The wave defenses are now random enemies, but overall the same, and you even have the same defense options from the last game. The pathfinding AI, the same for better or for worse. Even the plot on the surface level is the same. You're trying to get back to normal size and trying to find out what happened to you in the ceremony. Also, Bertle is a corpse. Rip the homie. His head. right off his little robot box shoulders. The inventory and equipment slots, pretty much the fucking same outside of a new paint job, and I know there's a good shot a lot of this had to be recoded given the engine upgrade, but it's hard to believe that when even the game repair button has seemingly copy and pasted text for backpack recovery. The button talks about your bag returning to the ravine, but if you didn't know, you don't come from a ravine in this game. You come from the Omninent training room. There's no ravine. I know that sounds silly, but all it did was really solidify that I didn't buy a sequel. I bought a $30 small content patch. I feel like a cashier at a grocery store and I'm giving out a deal that's one deal per customer, and I serve this customer called Mr. Grounded and they walk out only to walk in with a fake mustache as if he's not the same fucking guy. I feel like I'm being bamboozled here. There's a rug pull being set up and I'm not ready for it. Point is, I have yet to see this game give me a reason for the 2 in the title. Is this a bad game? No! Of course not. Like I said, it did everything from Grounded 1 the exact same way, so if we really think about it, the game is still great, but the problem is it's the sequel, the continuation of the series. Even if this game is early access, that doesn't excuse the fact that the game hardly feels any different from the previous one, which means while it's a good game, it's a currently bland sequel. Speaking of early access, I also don't entirely agree with this action to begin with. I get the idea of developing the game alongside the community like last time, but that logic falls flat on the fucking face the moment you realize that they could have easily released a finished product and then add content patches for like a couple years. Because right now, it's $30 for presumably a third of the content planned for the game. Early access or not, that's not acceptable in any situation. And I don't know if the funding was tight or what happened, but in my eyes, if the first game already made you a shit ton of money, you have little to no reason to be back in early access with the second title in the same series. Anyways, would I recommend you pick up this game? No, not at the time of this video anyways, which for context would be the launch week of the game. Instead, I'd actually recommend you buy the first game. Grounded 1 is a feature-complete experience and has tons of content for you to dip your toes into. And it's only like $10 more, and you can even watch the review I made for that game to see what it's all about before you even go and buy it. Grounded 2 literally just left early access, and it's in my opinion that this game is going to need quite a bit of time in the bomb beetle acid before I can endorse it, which with this roadmap we currently have, yeah, it's gonna be a while. I mean, hey, look, even some of the currently non-existent features from the previous game are in winter. That's an interesting detail. Definitely not tipping off that this game was supposed to wait till winter to release, but yeah, you know what? We'll go ahead and, well, don't worry, Captain, we'll buff out the scratches. Also, it's pretty obvious the summer update is going to be a water feature area, given how heavy-handed the water content is in the update. Anyways, as it stands, I can't in good faith recommend a game that's calling itself a sequel before it even has content to warrant that name, especially if it's an unfinished product. I mean, Overwatch 2 did this same shit, and I had the same reaction. It's not going to be any different here. Just go play the first game for now, and if the game gets a lot better a couple updates from now or by the full release, maybe I'll return and re-review it around then. But until that day, this has been The Bomb Dweller. Don't forget to breathe!